What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of 7 on Sunday right here on Beyond ARTV. Today I am going to be talking about my top 7 favorite independent record labels. The record labels that have that DIY spirit because they're not managed or licensed out to or distributed by a major record label. And for a lot, that's been a difficult thing to achieve. And not every single label that I'm going to talk about here has always been independent. They started independent, were bought out by someone, and then of course bought back in and remained independent once again. It's one of those things where if they are currently independent, then that is how they are eligible for this list. So I do hope that you enjoy this. I know this video is not going to be for everyone, and some people are like, who cares what label they're on? It's about the music. Well, sometimes, not and so much in modern days, but labels were so important and they weren't able to distribute music without a label, so that's where it comes into play, and many of these companies have a very rich history about them. So that's why we're talking about it. Geek out with me. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoy the video, and yeah, here's my first pick. Epitaph Records was founded all the way back in 1980, decades ago at this point. It was originally founded by the Bad Religion guitarist Brett Gurewitz, and at this point, obviously he was away from the band Bad Religion for a while, but he joined back in 2001, and he remains there to this day, overseeing the releases of Bad Religion and many other bands. Now, this originally started off as not just a record label really at all. It was more of just like a P.O. box where they used to send out stuff that was Bad Religion related, like their albums, distributing other merchandise, that sort of thing. But slowly it crept up on them. They didn't even realize what was happening as Brett started to sign punk bands and many other bands throughout the 90s and obviously the 2000s and the 2010s. They remain independent to this day, and Epitaph is one of the best examples, I feel like, of a very punk rock DIY ethic. It's something that they lived by, and originally they started off with punk music, but slowly it turned into something else in the 2000s. When Brett returned in 2001 to the label and the band Bad Religion, he obviously started signing some different artists that maybe they weren't originally known for. Post-hardcore was definitely a big thing, and when I found out about this label in the first place, it was because of the channel Fuse, and they were promoting the band Matchbook Romance. And if that shows you anything right there, it shows that they were getting into something that wasn't just punk, but they were also signing bands like Thursday, and then in 2010 they land the band Weezer, which was kind of a screwball that nobody really saw coming, but I do think that it is their worst album that unfortunately came out on that label. I do like Epitaph, even though I don't love every artist on this. This isn't about if I love all of the artists on the label or not. It's about the label and their spirit in general, and I think Epitaph have something great about them still to this day, and I've always admired them. It's quite possible that I'm your third man, girl, but it's a fact that I'm the seventh son. Third Man Records was founded in 2001 by none other than Jack White, of course. This man has the music pumping through his veins, and this would probably be higher up on the list. It's just that I'm not super familiar with every single artist on there, and I'm not always into everything that they do, but I really admire Third Man. Third Man Records actually recently opened up the first vinyl pressing plant in decades, the first new one that is, in 2017 at their second location, which is based out of Detroit, which is Jack White's hometown. Now, you probably know Jack White for his bands like obviously the White Stripes, the Raconteurs, the Dead Weather, and his solo stuff as well, and this originally started off as a way to release their own stuff in coordination with a major label, but Third Man remained independent. It was founded obviously back in the early 2000s, but to this day, they remain vital to the superfan. And I see the superfan because Third Man always seems to go out on that extra limb where they're like, we're going to get you the vault recordings, we're going to get you the demos, we're going to get you that vinyl pressing that you always wanted from your favorite artist that you never knew you were going to get, or else that live recording that you never knew that you needed. So I definitely think that Jack White has been a big factor in getting a lot of those things done, making it happen, just because he's passionate about these things, and he knows that other people are as well. And even if they aren't, maybe they've become so because of what he does with his label. I think that Third Man is doing great things, and like I said, I'm not always super familiar with their artists that they have signed, but at the same time, I respect the hell out of them, and I hope they keep it up. I hope that vinyl continues seeing its resurgence, and I hope that Third Man lives on forever. At number 5, we have Domino Recording Company, aka Domino Records. This was a label that was founded in London in 1993 and was originally set up as a way for artists who were popular in the US and were starting to get traction in the UK to actually release their albums in the UK. If you know anything about music, especially back in the day, it was very hard. If you caught wind of a band that was popular overseas, how did you get their music? Especially before the internet, it was impossible. Instead of having to ask a friend that lived overseas, going and getting it yourself, or somehow bootlegging it from a concert that somebody sent you in the mail, then labels started doing this. They started saying, all right, these bands are big over here, let's give them a record deal over here so we can distribute it. And Domino originally did that in the 90s. They struck gold big time in the early 2000s by signing two huge acts, two big bands, Franz Ferdinand and Arctic Monkeys, who actually both of those gave them their first respective number ones, with Franz Ferdinand's 2005 album You Can Have It So Much Better landing at number 1 on the albums chart, and I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor, the number 1 song in the UK by the Arctic Monkeys that same month in 2005. The label got their first certifications from these bands as well from the RIAA, and it was a weird time because a lot of labels in the early 2000s were obviously fighting to not be a part of the RIAA if they were independent, but it became a part, and now I don't think people care about it as much, neither do the labels. Some do, but most don't. Domino Records were one of those that actually started getting some certifications because of these bands, Franz Ferdinand and Arctic Monkeys. And to this day, they remain a prominent force. Both of those bands are still signed. Obviously, Alex Turner of the Arctic Monkeys has multiple projects on this label, Arctic Monkeys. The Last Shadow Puppets is solo stuff as well. And there's many other bands as they've branched out into different styles of music. I think that that's why they remain prominent and they still remain successful. Number 4, Rough Trade Records was founded in 1978. It was originally just a record store, and then it evolved into something so much more. Now, just like my last pick, this was also founded in London, and it has a very DIY ethos about it because they came up literally from nothing. Now, this label did go through a short term in the 2000s where they were bought out by someone, and then in 2007 they became independent again when they bought back the rights. So it was really interesting to see this label's history because I haven't always been in love with a ton of bands, or at least been familiar with a ton of them that have come through this label, but you always hear about Rough Trade, and I've actually ordered records from their obviously online record store before. I've never seen them in person but would love to, and I think their label has a very rich history and a variety of different artists. Over time, they have evolved. They started off with more alternative, rock, punk, and they've also in recent times signed more like indie-tronica, folk, and other types of rock-type bands, but they've expanded their sound so much that people don't always know exactly what to expect from them, and it keeps people guessing. It keeps people pleased because there is such a good variety. I think that Rough Trade Records remains vital in the community today just because they hold true to what they believe in and their independent spirit. Number 3, Run for Cover Records. This was founded in a dorm room in 2004 by Jeff Kazaka. Run for Cover Records. This is home to many bands that a lot of you probably listen to, and it's one of my favorite success stories for a label that I've seen so far. Not only have they been releasing over a decade's worth of rock albums, but they've been doing it independently. They went from just a dorm room to having an actual office in Boston, and I'm actually going to be in Boston this spring. I would love to visit their headquarters, so if you guys are watching, hook me up. They've been steadily releasing albums now for well over a decade, and the way that they handle themselves, it just seems very personable and down to earth. They're not like so many of these labels that are so desperately trying to grab your attention on social media with relatable gifts and pre-order, buy this random shirt, whatever. They just seem like genuine, down-to-earth people. In fact, one of their team members sent a postcard thanking my girlfriend for reviewing the latest Turnover music and promoting it. Bands like Turnover, Citizen, Basement, Pine Grove, Modern Baseball have all been involved with the label being signed to them at least at some point, and I think that they have a good track record. I always trust them, and I like to check out new releases from them, and I'm excited. Hopefully I get to visit their office when I'm there in May. At number 2, we have Hopeless Records. It was originally founded in 1993 in Los Angeles, California. Hopeless Records are a label that I hold a special place for in my heart just because they got me into a lot of acts in the mid-2000s. They were home to Avenged Sevenfold for their first 2 releases, they oversaw that, and they really didn't see a lot of success until the early 2000s. That's when they kind of found their stride and started signing bands of heavier varieties, pop punk as well, alternative music. And they became home to All Time Low, one of their biggest success stories, and they started getting some certifications and big sales thanks to bands like that. Now they're home to Sum 41, a lot of other bands that might have been super popular back in the day, but have now maybe not fallen off, but just couldn't deal with a major label and the pressure there anymore. I think that Hopeless has always done a good job at just kind of letting the band be the band and not putting a ton of pressure on them to maybe sound a certain way. Now, obviously, I'll never know all of the behind the scenes and what labels want, but all I'm saying is that when All Time Low were signed to Hopeless Records, they put out nothing but good stuff. But their 2 albums that they've released on other labels have been, not so good whatsoever. You tell me. Finally, at the number 1 pick, I had to put Matador Records here. I know a lot of people rave about this label, but they truly are such a great American success story. They were founded in a New York City apartment, and then they grew into what they are now. There's so many artists that I love on this label, at least in terms of what they have currently, and even their back catalog. The label really got their start in 1989 in that apartment, and their first big breakthrough came in 1993 with the release of Exile in Guyville, the first Liz Phair album. And she went on to have a big career. Coincidentally, I wasn't even planning this video, but I recently just heard that album for the first time, and it's crazy. I was like, oh, this came out on this label? Cool. They slowly started scooping up bands like Interpol, which had a big album with 2002's Turn on the Bright Lights, and the New Pornographers, a Canadian band that had crossover success in the United States, and they've slowly added really big acts like Queens of the Stone Age, one of my favorite bands, Julian Baker, and Car Seat Headrest. I think that this label definitely has even more great things in store for us, with a very vital and important history just backing them. Chris Lombardi has taken this thing to an insane level that most people told him probably would never happen. Now, obviously, they remained independent, and I hope that it always stays that way. Thanks for watching another episode of 7 on Sunday, guys. Don't forget to drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you were brand new here, and if you were able to, please support me on Patreon at this annotation in the corner of the screen. You can see last week's episode right here, or another recent video right over here. Other than that, I'll see you soon on Beyond ARTV.